The rain fell relentlessly, a relentless downpour that blurred the edges of my car's windshield. I stared at the screen of my GPS as it guided me deeper into the unfamiliar territory. The GPS estimated 25 more minutes until my destination, the remote farmhouse. The unease began to gnaw at me, a creeping sensation that coiled around my chest like a tightening noose. I had been working as a delivery driver for the local pizzeria for months, and this assignment felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about this order made my skin prickle with apprehension. The narrow road stretched endlessly before me, flanked by towering trees that loomed like silent sentinels in the darkness. The town's warm glow had faded into obscurity behind me, and I was venturing deeper into an isolated abyss. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I navigated the wet, winding road. A sense of isolation gnawed at me as I passed only a few scattered houses, their windows shrouded in curtains of rain. This farmhouse was different from the typical deliveries to suburban neighborhoods or bustling apartment complexes. It was an anomaly, a solitary structure in the middle of nowhere. With each mile, the unease grew like an invisible weight pressing down on my shoulders. I was alone on this journey, with only the sporadic hum of my car's engine and the relentless drumming of the rain on the roof for company. The darkness outside was absolute, the only illumination coming from the weak beams of my headlights. The farmhouse was unlike anything I had delivered to before. As I approached, my headlights cast eerie, elongated shadows on its aging, weather-beaten facade. The porch light beckoned like a distant, wavering star in the stormy night, the only sign of life within this desolate abyss. Despite the growing knot of apprehension, I knew I had a job to do. I parked my car just beyond the house, the grass field before me a murky, rain-soaked canvas. The gravel path leading to the porch glistened with moisture, its final destination veiled in darkness. With a sigh, I stepped out of the car, the patter of raindrops against my jacket, punctuating the silence. I grabbed the pizza box and braved the journey to the porch, each step echoing in the quiet night. The unease grew like a chorus of whispers just beyond my hearing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the shadows, a lurking presence hidden among the trees or behind the farmhouse's aged walls. The porch light above me flickered momentarily, casting dancing shadows across the creaking wooden boards. I placed the pizza box on the doorstep, feeling a growing urgency to complete the delivery and escape this desolate place. With trembling fingers, I rang the doorbell, the shrill chime cutting through the heavy silence. As I turned to leave, my heart skipped a beat. From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement, a fleeting shadow in the periphery. I froze, the world around me suddenly still. The rain fell in a steady, relentless rhythm, but all other sounds seemed to vanish into the void. The farmhouse's windows remained dark, and the porch light cast its feeble glow into the obscurity. Then, like a whisper on the wind, I heard it, the sound that sent shivers racing down my spine. It came from behind the house, from the direction of the backyard. It was a noise like a wooden door slowly creaking open, a sound both eerie and inexplicable in the stormy night. I stood there caught in the grip of fear, my senses on high alert. The unease I had felt earlier now solidified into a paralyzing dread. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run back to my car and escape this place, but my feet remained rooted to the porch. In the ensuing silence, I strained to hear any further sounds, the footsteps of an approaching figure, the murmur of a voice, or the rustling of leaves. But there was nothing, only the relentless rain and the sensation of eyes upon me from the shadows. The seconds stretched into an eternity, each one marked by the unrelenting patter of raindrops. I had a choice, to confront the source of that eerie noise or to retreat and leave the mystery of the farmhouse behind. But as I stood there, indecision gripped me like a vice, and the darkness seemed to draw closer, enveloping me in its sinister embrace. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob to escape from the farmhouse's porch, but what awaited me beyond remained an unresolved mystery, shrouded in darkness and dread. The air around me hung heavy with tension. As I turned away from the farmhouse's porch, my footsteps carrying me back to my car. Each stride seemed to echo in the stillness of the night, my senses alert to any sign of movement or sound from the surrounding darkness. I reached my car, its familiar form offering a glimmer of safety in the desolate night. My heart thudded in my chest, and my breath came in shallow, uncertain gasps. The unease that had gripped me earlier now intensified, like a warning whispered by the very landscape itself. As I approached my car, the rain continued its ceaseless assault, its rhythm, a relentless backdrop to my growing trepidation. The gravel path beneath my feet crunched softly with each step, a mournful dirge in the eerie quiet. My car's headlights pierced the darkness, casting a pallid glow on the farmhouse's aging exterior. Its wooden walls bore the scars of time, a silent testament to decades of weathered existence in this remote location. I hesitated before the driver's side door, my hand hovering above the handle. The rational part of me urged a swift departure to leave this eerie place behind and forget the unsettling noise from the backyard. But the mystery of the farmhouse, the unexplained noise, and the relentless rain combined to anchor me in place. I knew I couldn't ignore it, that my curiosity had been ignited like a flickering candle in the storm. With a deep breath, I resolved to investigate, to shed light on the enigma that clung to the farmhouse like a shroud. I had come this far and fear would not dictate my actions, clinging to that resolve. I turned back toward the porch. The glow of the porch light seemed dimmer now, its frail illumination revealing little of the farmhouse's interior. The wooden steps creaked beneath my weight as I ascended, each one a reluctant witness to my return. I approached the door, the unease resurfacing like an invisible hand tightening its grip. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, uncertainty and anticipation intertwining like serpents in my mind. The door swung open, and the foyer beyond was swallowed by shadows. The single light in the corner, a dim safety beacon, offered little comfort. The farmhouse was an empty expanse of silence, the absence of life and warmth palpable in the air. My footsteps echoed in the darkness as I ventured further inside. The hallway stretched before me, a yawning chasm of uncertainty. I strained to see beyond the feeble light's reach, but the corridor remained shrouded in obscurity. The logical part of me sought an explanation, a rational answer for the eerie noise and the unsettling atmosphere. Perhaps the farmhouse was simply abandoned, left to the ravages of time and nature. But doubt lingered, an unspoken question that hung in the air. Why had I heard that inexplicable sound, and why did it feel like I was being watched from the shadows? With hesitant steps, I moved deeper into the farmhouse, my senses on high alert. The walls bore the faded remnants of wallpaper, peeling and yellowed with age. The air held a musty odor as though the very essence of the place had soured over time. There was no sign of life, no furniture, no photographs, no personal belongings. It was as though the farmhouse had been frozen in time, a relic of the past forgotten by the world. As I walked, the unease intensified, a chorus of whispers at the edge of my perception. My ears strained to catch any sound, any hint of movement, but there was nothing. The farmhouse remained a silent enigma, its secrets locked away in the shadows. I reached a corner, the corridor extending further into the darkness. The decision loomed before me, to continue my exploration or to turn back and leave the mysteries of the farmhouse behind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something lay hidden, just out of sight, waiting to be discovered. The farmhouse held its secrets close, and I was determined to unearth them, to reveal the truth that lurked in the depths of the darkness. With a resolute breath, I pressed forward, the shadows closing in around me, and the unanswered questions of the farmhouse beckoning like an irresistible siren's call. I ventured deeper into the farmhouse, my steps echoing in the oppressive silence. The shadows clung to the walls, and the dim light cast eerie, elongated shapes that danced on the peeling wallpaper. My curiosity had overridden my fear, and I was determined to unravel the enigma that had drawn me here. The hallway seemed endless, its unlit corners and doorways concealing untold secrets. I felt as though I was descending into a labyrinth of uncertainty, each step taking me further from the safety of the outside world. The unease persisted, a palpable presence that settled like a heavy fog in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone in the farmhouse, that unseen eyes watched my every move. As I walked, my ears strained to catch any sound, any clue that might explain the unsettling noise I had heard earlier. The farmhouse remained stubbornly silent as though it held its breath, waiting for me to uncover its mysteries. I reached a door, its weathered wood a stark contrast to the peeling wallpaper. The handle felt cold and metallic beneath my trembling fingers as I turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a room shrouded in darkness. I stepped inside, the faint glow from the hallway providing little illumination. The room was empty, devoid of furniture or decoration. The air felt stale, as though it hadn't been disturbed in years. My gaze was drawn to the far corner of the room, where a small window offered a glimpse of the stormy night outside. Rain battered against the glass, casting distorted shadows on the walls. It was then that I noticed something peculiar, a faint rhythmic tapping like the sound of fingers drumming on glass. I approached the window, my breath catching in my throat as I peered outside. There, in the rain-swept darkness, I saw it, a figure standing just beyond the window pane. Its face was obscured by the rain-streaked glass, but its presence was undeniable. Panic surged within me, and I stumbled back from the window, my heart pounding in my chest. The farmhouse had seemed empty, abandoned, but now I knew I was not alone. Someone, or something, was here with me. The tapping continued, a persistent rhythm that echoed in the room. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the window, from the obscured figure on the other side. Fear paralyzed me, rendering me helpless as I watched, unable to decipher the intentions of the mysterious presence. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the tapping ceased. The figure outside the window remained motionless, its intentions hidden behind a mask of rain and darkness. I knew I had to leave, to escape the farmhouse and its unsettling mysteries. With trembling hands, I turned and rushed back into the hallway, my footsteps echoing like a drumbeat in the silence. As I retraced my steps toward the front door, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that unseen eyes were watching my every move. The unease had transformed into sheer terror, and I knew I had to escape the farmhouse before it was too late. The rain outside had intensified, a torrential downpour that matched the storm raging within me. I reached the front door, my fingers fumbling for the doorknob. With a final desperate twist, I flung the door open and stumbled out onto the porch. The rain lashed at me, soaking me to the bone as I sprinted toward my car. The farmhouse loomed behind me, a dark and foreboding presence in the night. As I drove away, the sense of dread still clung to me, a lingering reminder of the unsettling noise and the mysterious figure in the window. The farmhouse had revealed only fragments of its secrets, leaving me with unanswered questions that gnawed at my sanity. I knew that I could never return to that place, that the farmhouse and its mysteries would forever haunt my nightmares. The unease had given way to a deep, abiding fear, and I was left to wonder what dark secrets lay hidden within its walls. The rain continued to pour, an unrelenting deluge that mirrored the turmoil within me. The farmhouse and its unsettling mysteries were now behind me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent lingered in the shadows. I had returned to the safety of my car, the rain-drenched interior offering little comfort. The unease that had gripped me earlier had transformed into a gnawing dread, a sense of impending doom that clung to me like a shroud. I knew I had to leave, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the farmhouse. My trembling hands fumbled for the car keys, and with a shaky breath, I turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I accelerated away from that accursed place. The farmhouse dwindled in the rearview mirror, its dark silhouette gradually receding into the distance. The rain-slicked road stretched out before me, and I clung to the hope that I could escape the horrors of that night. But as I drove, the feeling of unease persisted, a lingering presence that whispered in the recesses of my mind. I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched, that unseen eyes followed my every move. The minutes passed in torturous slowness, the rain-swept landscape a blur of shadows and uncertainty. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. I needed to get back to civilization, to the familiar streets and the comforting glow of streetlights. As I rounded a bend in the road, my headlights illuminated a solitary figure standing at the side of the highway. My heart leaped into my throat as I approached, and I instinctively slowed the car. The figure was a man, his clothes soaked through by the relentless rain. He stood motionless, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket. Panic surged within me as I recognized the familiarity of his presence. the same figure I had seen outside the farmhouse's window. I should have kept driving, should have left that ominous figure behind in the stormy night. But a morbid curiosity compelled me to stop, to confront the source of my fear. I rolled down the window, the rain pelting my face as I called out to the man, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The man remained silent, his hooded face unmoving. The unease I had felt earlier intensified, a heavy weight in the pit of my stomach. Before I could react, the man lunged forward, his hands grasping at the car door. Panic coursed through me as I fumbled for the door lock, but it was too late. With a strength that defied his emaciated appearance, the man wrenched the door open. I screamed as he lunged into the car, his rain-soaked clothes clinging to his gaunt frame. His face was hidden in shadow, but his eyes burned with a malevolent intensity. I fought back with every ounce of strength I possessed, desperately trying to push him away. His hands clawed at me, his fingers cold and clammy as they closed around my throat. The world outside the car became a blur of rain and darkness as I struggled for breath. My vision narrowed, and I felt the cold grip of death closing in around me. But just as I was on the brink of surrendering to oblivion, a blinding light pierced the darkness. The headlights of an approaching car bathed the scene in brilliant illumination, and the man's grip faltered. I gasped for air as he was pulled away from me, the blaring horn of the oncoming car drowning out the chaos of the moment. The man stumbled back, disappearing into the night. The driver of the approaching car slammed on the brakes, and I watched in horror as it skidded to a stop just inches from my own. The driver's side window rolled down, revealing the concerned face of a stranger. "Are you okay?" the stranger asked, their voice filled with genuine concern. I nodded weakly, my heart still pounding in my chest. The man who had attacked me was gone, vanished into the stormy night. The stranger offered to call the police, and I accepted their help, recounting the night's horrifying events to the arriving officers. But as I told my story, I couldn't help but feel that the true source of my terror remained hidden in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity to strike. The farmhouse, the mysterious figure, and the attack were all pieces of a nightmarish puzzle, and I was left with more questions than answers. The darkness of that night had left an indelible mark on my soul, and I knew that the mysteries it held would continue to haunt me for the rest of my days. The police investigation into the night of terror began in earnest. Officers took my statement, recorded the details of the attack, and scoured the area for any signs of the mysterious figure who had assaulted me. Despite their efforts, there were no immediate leads, no clues to identify the assailant. I sat in the cramped interview room at the police station, my wet clothes clinging to my skin, my hands still trembling from the encounter. Detective Anderson, a seasoned investigator with a weary expression, sat across from me. "Can you describe the man who attacked you?" Detective Anderson asked, his voice calm and reassuring. I tried my best to recall the details, the hooded jacket, the obscured face, the piercing eyes. He was tall, I think. His face was hidden in the shadows, but his eyes, they were intense. Detective Anderson jotted down notes as I spoke, his pen scratching against the paper. "Did he say anything to you? Did he give any indication of his intentions?" I shook my head, my memory of the encounter a blur of fear and adrenaline. "No, he didn't speak. He just lunged at me." The detective leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on me. "We're doing everything we can to find this individual. It's possible that he's connected to the farmhouse you mentioned. We'll investigate that lead as well." I nodded, my thoughts returning to the enigmatic farmhouse and the unsettling noise I had heard within its walls. There was something strange about that place. It felt haunted almost. Detective Anderson's expression remained unreadable. "Haunted or not, we'll look into it. But I need you to be cautious from now on. Don't venture out alone, especially at night. We'll provide you with protection if necessary." The investigation continued over the following weeks, with the police scrutinizing the farmhouse, searching for any clues that might shed light on the identity of my attacker. They questioned local residents, delved into the history of the farmhouse, and even brought in a psychic medium to explore the possibility of supernatural involvement. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself consumed by a sense of dread that refused to dissipate. The rain-soaked night, the farmhouse, the attack, all were intertwined in a web of inexplicable terror. I couldn't escape the feeling that there was more to the story, that some malevolent force lurked in the shadows, eluding the grasp of both the police and my own understanding. One evening, Detective Anderson called me with an update. "We've searched the farmhouse thoroughly," he said, his tone somber. "There's no sign of the man you encountered, and we couldn't find any concrete evidence of his presence there." I listened in silence, my unease deepening. "What about the noise? The tapping I heard inside the farmhouse?" The detective sighed. "We couldn't determine the source of the noise. It's possible that it was simply a result of the old building settling, but we can't say for sure." The unresolved mysteries weighed heavily on my mind. The police investigation had reached a dead end, leaving me with more questions than answers. The farmhouse remained a haunting enigma, and the identity of my attacker remained shrouded in darkness. I followed Detective Anderson's advice, avoiding solitary nighttime outings and taking precautions to protect myself. But the sense of unease persisted, a constant reminder of the night that had changed my life forever. As the days turned into months, I couldn't escape the feeling that the mysteries of that fateful night would remain unsolved, that the true nature of the farmhouse and its enigmatic inhabitant would forever elude my grasp. The rain still fell, the stormy night a distant memory, but the darkness it had brought into my life remained, an ever-present shadow that refused to fade. It was a moonless night when I found myself driving down a desolate road that seemed to stretch on forever. The tall, looming trees on either side of the narrow asphalt created an eerie canopy, casting long, shifting shadows that played tricks on my weary mind. The branches of the trees hung low, reaching out as if to snatch away any hint of moonlight that dared to penetrate the thick canopy. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, and the hum of the engine was the only sound that broke the silence. I had been a delivery driver for years, but this was unlike any delivery I had ever made. The order had come from an unfamiliar address, deep in the heart of a forested wilderness that felt a world away from civilization. As I drove further into the darkness, the GPS signal grew weaker, and I began to second-guess my decision to take this route. The pings of my phone became sporadic, and the only source of light was my car's dim headlights that barely pierced the inky blackness ahead. My unease grew with each passing mile, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows seemed to move in the periphery of my vision, and strange shapes loomed in the darkness, disappearing when I turned to look directly at them. A sudden chill ran down my spine, and I realized that I had missed a turn according to the GPS. It instructed me to take a narrow, unpaved road that branched off from the main route. Reluctantly, I followed the GPS's instructions, my headlights revealing a path that seemed to lead deeper into the wilderness. The unpaved road was rough and uneven, causing my car to jolt and sway as I navigated through the dense forest. The trees closed in around me, their branches scraping against the car's roof like skeletal fingers. It was as if the forest itself was trying to keep me from reaching my destination. My phone's GPS signal had all but disappeared now, leaving me to rely solely on the winding path ahead. The isolation was suffocating, and the sense of being utterly alone in the heart of the wilderness filled me with dread. As I rounded a bend in the road, my headlights illuminated a dilapidated sign that sent a shiver down my spine. It read, "No exit." The road ahead seemed to narrow and twist into an impenetrable thicket of trees, and I couldn't see where it led. My heart raced as I contemplated my options. I could turn back, retrace my steps through the foreboding forest, or I could continue down this ominous path into the unknown. The rational part of me screamed to turn back, to escape this nightmarish road, but something inexplicable drew me forward deeper into the darkness. With a heavy sense of foreboding, I continued down the winding road, my headlights cutting through the oppressive blackness. The journey ahead held an air of impending doom, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was hurtling toward a fate from which there would be no escape. The winding road seemed to have no end as I pressed forward into the heart of the ominous forest. My headlights cut through the darkness, revealing gnarled trees and tangled underbrush that seemed to conspire against me. The feeling of being watched had intensified, and my unease deepened with each passing minute. As I rounded another bend, I saw something that made my blood run cold, a figure standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by my headlights. I slammed on the brakes, bringing my car to a screeching halt just inches from the mysterious figure. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the person before me. They were dressed in tattered clothes that hung loosely on their frail frame, and their eyes held a vacant, haunted look. Their disheveled appearance and the way they swayed on unsteady legs sent a wave of dread through me. Before I could react, the figure reached out with bony, trembling fingers and with surprising strength, they yanked open my car door. Panic surged through me as I fought to push them away, but they were relentless, their grip like a vice. As I struggled, I noticed something chilling about the person's eyes. Their pupils were dilated to an unnatural degree, swallowing the irises entirely. It was as though they were devoid of humanity, as if some malevolent force had taken hold of them. Desperation fueled my efforts to break free, and I managed to push the person away and slam the car door shut. I locked it just as the figure lunged at me, their hands clawing at the windows like a feral creature. Fear coursed through me as I accelerated, leaving the deranged figure behind in my rearview mirror. I didn't know what had just happened, but I was determined to get as far away from that forest as possible. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, of returning to the safety of civilization. But as I drove, the sense of being watched returned stronger than ever. Shadows danced at the periphery of my vision, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. It was as though the forest itself had become a malevolent entity, closing in on me with sinister intent. Suddenly, my car's engine sputtered and died, and the headlights flickered out, plunging me into pitch-black darkness. Panic set in as I fumbled for my phone, praying for a signal to call for help. But the phone's screen remained blank, and the forest's oppressive silence closed in around me. I was trapped, alone in the heart of the forest, with no way to escape. The events of the night had taken a nightmarish turn, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into something beyond my understanding. The abduction by the eerie figure was only the beginning of the horrors that awaited me in the relentless grip of the forest. With my car's engine dead and my phone devoid of signal, panic threatened to consume me as the oppressive darkness of the forest closed in. I could feel the malevolent presence of the trees, their branches like gnarled fingers reaching out to claim me. But I refused to surrender to the horrors that lurked in the shadows. Summoning all my courage, I fumbled for the car door handle and pushed it open. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped out into the inky blackness. My only source of light was a small flashlight I kept in the glove compartment, and I retrieved it with trembling hands. The forest was eerily silent, save for the distant rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. I knew I had to move to put as much distance as possible between myself and the malevolent figure that had attacked me. With the flashlight in hand, I started to walk, my footsteps echoing through the stillness. The path before me was treacherous, with uneven terrain and roots that seemed to reach out and trip me at every turn. I stumbled and fell more than once, my heart racing with every unexpected noise that pierced the silence. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being pursued. It was as though unseen eyes followed my every move, and the shadows at the edge of my flashlight's beam seemed to shift and writhe. Fear clawed at me, urging me to run, but I knew that in my panicked state I would only lose my way further. Hours passed in what felt like an eternal night, and I had no sense of how deep I was in the forest. My only goal was to escape its suffocating embrace and find help. The thought of that deranged figure still haunted me, and I wondered if they were lurking in the darkness, waiting for an opportunity to strike again. Suddenly, my flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in complete darkness. I fumbled for the spare batteries in my pocket and quickly replaced them, praying that the light would return. When I switched it back on, I gasped at what I saw. Standing just a few feet away, partially obscured by the shadows, was the figure, the same one that had attacked me earlier. Their eyes, still dilated and devoid of humanity, bore into me with an unsettling intensity. In their hand, they clutched a rusted, serrated knife. My heart raced, and I knew I had to escape. I turned and ran blindly into the forest, branches and thorns tearing at my skin as I pushed through the underbrush. Behind me, I could hear the figure giving chase, their uneven footsteps echoing through the darkness. Fear lent me strength, and I pushed myself harder, willing myself to find a way out of this nightmare. The forest seemed to go on forever, but I couldn't stop. My life depended on it. Just when I thought I could run no further, I burst through the tree line and found myself on a narrow road. The figure had fallen behind, and I didn't dare look back. I sprinted down the road, my breath coming in ragged gasps, until I spotted the distant glow of civilization. Relief flooded through me as I approached a house with its porch light on. I pounded on the door, begging for help from whoever was inside. When the door opened, I knew I was safe at last. But as I looked back into the darkness of the forest, I couldn't help but wonder what had brought me to that nightmarish place, and what horrors still lurked within its shadowy depths. The escape had come at a great cost, and the mysteries of the forest were far from over. The house I had stumbled upon was occupied by a kind elderly couple who took me in with open arms and called the police to report the terrifying encounter I had just endured. While I was safe for the time being, the sinister forest and its mysteries continued to weigh heavily on my mind. The police arrived promptly and I recounted my harrowing experience in the dark, foreboding woods. They listened attentively, but I could see doubt flicker in their eyes. It was as though they struggled to believe the horrors I had faced. Determined to uncover the truth, they decided to launch an investigation into the remote forest area. I agreed to accompany them, feeling a sense of responsibility to expose the malevolent presence that lurked within those woods. As we ventured back into the forest during daylight hours, it seemed almost unrecognizable from the nightmarish landscape I had traversed. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor, and the tranquil sounds of nature replaced the eerie silence of the night. Detective Hayes, a seasoned officer with a skeptical demeanor, led the group. He eyed the trees with a hint of suspicion, clearly doubting the veracity of my story. "Let's hope you weren't just chasing shadows out here," he muttered under his breath. We followed the path I had taken on my escape, hoping to find any evidence of the deranged figure that had pursued me. It wasn't long before we discovered something disturbing: a hidden makeshift shelter nestled among the trees. The shelter was constructed from tattered tarps and branches, a crude attempt at a dwelling. Inside we found remnants of human existence, a filthy mattress, discarded clothing, and empty food wrappers. It was clear that someone had been living here, someone who had abandoned their humanity in favor of the isolation of the forest. Detective Hayes crouched down to examine the shelter, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. "This isn't your average campsite," he muttered, his tone grim. "This looks more like a hideout." As we continued to search, our discovery took a more chilling turn. Beneath the shelter, partially hidden by a pile of leaves, we found a shallow grave. The earth had been disturbed, and we could only imagine what lay beneath. Detective Hayes signaled for the others to back away as he carefully began to dig. My heart pounded in my chest as the first hint of something buried came into view. The police quickly uncovered a decomposed human body, its remains tangled with roots and dirt. The stench of death hung heavy in the air, and a collective gasp escaped the officers. The gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through our small town. The police identified the victim as a missing person, a hiker who had vanished in the forest months ago. It appeared that the sinister figure that had pursued me was not acting alone, but was part of a larger, horrifying truth hidden within the woods. Detective Hayes radioed for backup and secured the area, his initial skepticism now replaced with a grim determination. "We've got a serial killer on our hands," he said, his voice hushed but resolute. The investigation into the hidden lair and the gruesome discovery continued, but the mysteries of the forest deepened with every revelation. Who was responsible for this macabre secret, and what drove them to commit such heinous acts in the heart of the wilderness? Despite the gruesome discoveries, the malevolent presence of the forest remained, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was more to uncover. The horrors of the hidden lair were just the tip of the iceberg, and the true nature of the forest's darkness continued to elude us, leaving me with a lingering fear that there was more to come. As the investigation into the hidden lair and the gruesome discovery unfolded, it became clear that the malevolent presence lurking within the forest ran deeper than anyone had anticipated. My escape from that nightmarish ordeal had only scratched the surface of the mysteries hidden within the sinister woods. The police intensified their efforts to identify the person responsible for the horrors found in the makeshift shelter and the shallow grave. They interviewed locals and searched for any leads that might shed light on the enigmatic figure I had encountered and the sinister secrets of the forest. However, as the days turned into weeks and then months, the trail seemed to grow colder with each passing moment. The identity of the deranged individual remained a haunting mystery, and the reasons behind their gruesome acts remained elusive. The forest itself held its secrets close, refusing to yield its mysteries to the relentless investigation. It was as though the woods had a malevolent sentience, a dark force that jealously guarded its macabre truths. Those who ventured into its depths continued to vanish without a trace, leaving behind only questions and fear. It was past midnight, and the city had long fallen into a deep slumber. I found myself standing in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The air was thick with tension, and the distant rumble of thunder added an eerie ambiance to the night. I had become ensnared in a web of mystery and danger, all because of the man who had once attacked me on a rainy night. His relentless pursuit and cryptic messages had pushed me to the edge, and I knew I had to confront him, to expose the truth. The coded instructions had led me here, to this forsaken place. I parked my car some distance away, keeping it concealed from prying eyes. With each step I took towards the warehouse, my heart raced, and my palms grew clammy. The building loomed before me, a decrepit relic of forgotten industry. Broken windows stared like vacant eyes, and graffiti-covered walls whispered secrets of those who had come and gone. Moonlight struggled to penetrate the darkness within. I stepped cautiously into the warehouse, my senses on high alert. The air was stifling, thick with dust and foreboding. I moved deeper into the abyss, my footsteps echoing through the desolation. There, in the heart of the warehouse, I stumbled upon a haunting tableau. A circle of figures cloaked in shadows stood in eerie silence. At its center, the man who had haunted my nightmares gazed upon a grotesque effigy, an abomination of limbs and faces adorned with sinister symbols. Chilled to the bone, I knew I had to capture this nightmarish scene as evidence. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and began recording, my heart pounding in my chest. But my presence did not go unnoticed. The man's head snapped in my direction, his eyes locking onto mine. It was as if he could pierce through the darkness and see the fear that coursed through my veins. The cloaked figures, their faces shrouded in darkness, turned towards me in unison. Their movements were synchronized, and their intentions were clear. I had stumbled upon something beyond comprehension, something that would stop at nothing to remain hidden. As they advanced, their eyes gleaming with an unnatural malevolence, I realized the depth of the danger I had walked into. The secrets they harbored were darker than I could have ever imagined, and there was no escape from the nightmare that awaited. The cloaked figures closed in on me, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous expanse of the warehouse. Fear surged through me, threatening to paralyze my every move. I had ventured too far into a world that defied reason, and there was no turning back. The man, his gaze unwavering, approached with an air of eerie calm. It was as though he had been expecting me, as though my presence was a part of some sinister plan. I could see the cold, calculating intelligence in his eyes, a mind that had been twisted by the darkness that surrounded him. With every step they took, the air grew colder, and the symbols adorning the grotesque effigy seemed to pulse with an unholy energy. The atmosphere itself seemed to conspire against me, as if the very walls of the warehouse were closing in. My phone continued to record, the lens capturing the nightmarish tableau before me. I knew that this evidence was my only lifeline, my only means of escaping the horrors that lurked in the shadows. The man finally spoke, his voice a low, sinister whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "You shouldn't have come here," he hissed, the words dripping with malevolence. "You've seen too much." I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I turned to find one of the cloaked figures standing behind me. The figure's grip was icy, and I realized with a sinking feeling that there was no way out. They had me surrounded, trapped in their malevolent grasp. As the seconds ticked away, I weighed my options. Should I make a run for it, try to break free from their hold, and risk the unknown horrors that lay beyond the warehouse? Or should I continue recording, hoping that someone, somewhere, would see the truth I had uncovered? Before I could decide, the man produced a blade from beneath his cloak, its glinting edge reflecting the dim light. "Your curiosity will be your downfall," he declared, raising the blade menacingly. The cloaked figures closed in further, their intentions clear. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and I was about to descend even deeper into the abyss of darkness. The blade glinted ominously in the dim light, and my heart raced as I realized the gravity of the situation. The man with the sinister whisper held the weapon with a chilling determination, while the cloaked figures around me closed in, their grips tightening. I knew I had only moments to make a decision that would determine my fate. The echoes of the distant thunder seemed to mock my predicament, and the symbols on the grotesque effigy pulsed with a malevolent energy, as though they were alive and hungry for darkness. With a surge of adrenaline, I made a desperate dash toward the nearest exit, determined to escape the clutches of these sinister figures. The world around me blurred as I sprinted through the warehouse, my heart pounding in my chest. The cold, unforgiving floor seemed to stretch endlessly, and the sound of my own labored breathing filled the air. The ominous whisper of the man pursued me like a haunting specter, each word laced with malice. "You can't run from what you've seen," he taunted, his voice echoing through the desolation. As I reached the exit, I fumbled for the door handle, my trembling hands struggling to find purchase. The world outside was cloaked in darkness and rain, but it was a sight far less terrifying than the nightmare I had just left behind. I stumbled into the wet night, the rain soaking through my clothes as I gasped for breath. I could hear the distant sounds of pursuit behind me, the figures determined to reclaim their secrets. My phone, still recording, had captured the chilling encounter, and I knew that the evidence I held could expose the darkness that lurked within the abandoned warehouse. But the man's words lingered in my mind. Had I truly seen too much? I had to find a way to share the truth with the world, to let the shadows be exposed to the light. With every step I took, I knew that the horrors I had witnessed would haunt me forever, but I couldn't allow them to remain hidden. As I disappeared into the night, my mind raced with questions. Who were these cloaked figures, and what were they trying to protect? What secrets did the grotesque effigy hold, and how deep did the darkness go? The rain continued to pour, washing away the remnants of that nightmarish encounter. But the scars it left on my soul would remain, a constant reminder of the chilling revelation that there are horrors lurking in the shadows, waiting to be unveiled. The days that followed that nightmarish encounter were filled with a sense of dread that refused to dissipate. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched, that the sinister figures from the abandoned warehouse were lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Despite the unease that gnawed at me, I knew I had to share the evidence I had captured on my phone with the authorities. The chilling whisper, the grotesque effigy, and the cloaked figures. The world needed to know the truth. I made my way to the local police station, feeling the weight of the recording device in my pocket like a burden. The rain had finally subsided, but the skies remained overcast, casting a pall over the town. The officer at the front desk eyed me warily as I approached, my nerves evident in the tremor of my voice as I explained the situation. I played the recording, watching the officer's expression shift from skepticism to growing concern as he listened. He promised to launch an investigation into the abandoned warehouse and the individuals involved, assuring me that they would take it seriously. But as I left the police station, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As the days turned into weeks, I heard nothing from the authorities. The cloaked figures and their sinister secrets remained shrouded in darkness, and I couldn't help but wonder if they had infiltrated even the highest levels of law enforcement. Paranoia consumed me. I took to watching the shadows, convinced that every passerby was one of them in disguise. Sleep became a distant memory as nightmares plagued my nights, filled with grotesque effigies and haunting whispers. One evening, as I sat in my dimly lit apartment, I received a call from an unknown number. Hesitant, I answered, and a voice, distorted and chilling, greeted me. "You should have kept quiet," it hissed. The dread in my chest intensified as the voice continued, recounting details of my daily life, where I went, who I spoke to, even what I had for breakfast that morning. It was a clear message that I was being watched, that there was no escape from the shadows. Terrified and desperate for answers, I reached out to a journalist I had once admired for her investigative work. I hoped that she could help me expose the truth and shed light on the horrors I had uncovered. We met in a dimly lit cafe, our voices hushed as I recounted my chilling encounter and the subsequent harassment. The journalist listened intently, her eyes filled with a mix of concern and determination. She promised to look into the matter, to dig deeper into the dark secrets hidden within the abandoned warehouse. But as we parted ways, I couldn't help but fear that I had unwittingly dragged her into the same web of shadows that ensnared me. The investigation into the cloaked figures and their grotesque effigy continued, but the more we uncovered, the more elusive the truth became. It was as though the darkness itself was fighting to remain hidden, determined to protect its secrets at any cost. As I delved deeper into the heart of the mystery, I couldn't shake the feeling that the sinister figures were closing in, that their whispers were growing louder with each passing day. The revelation I had sought had become a relentless nightmare, and the horrors lurking in the shadows showed no sign of relenting. The relentless pursuit of the truth had led me deeper into a nightmarish world of cloaked figures and their sinister secrets. With each step I took, the shadows seemed to close in, and the whispers grew louder, a constant reminder that I was not alone in this battle. The journalist I had confided in proved to be an invaluable ally. Together, we combed through every piece of information we could find, trying to unearth the identities of the cloaked figures and the purpose behind their macabre rituals. Our investigation led us to a local historian who had spent years researching the abandoned warehouse and the surrounding area. He spoke of dark legends, tales of a cult that had once thrived in the town, conducting rituals in secret hidden from prying eyes. The historian's account sent shivers down our spines, and we realized that the cloaked figures might be descendants of this malevolent cult, continuing their sinister practices in the shadows. But uncovering the truth would prove to be an even greater challenge. As we delved deeper into the town's history, we uncovered a chilling pattern of disappearances and unexplained deaths that spanned decades. It seemed that anyone who had come close to exposing the cult had met a gruesome fate, their lives claimed by the relentless darkness that enveloped the town. The journalist and I received ominous threats, warning us to abandon our investigation. But we were driven by an unrelenting determination to bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. Months passed, and the journalist had become my confidant and partner in unraveling the mysteries of the cult. We pored over our findings, piecing together a chilling narrative of rituals, sacrifices, and a malevolent entity that defied comprehension. But as our investigation deepened, the journalist grew increasingly restless. She confided in me, expressing her fear that the cult's influence extended far beyond what we had uncovered. She believed that their web of secrecy reached into the highest echelons of power, that they were protected by unseen forces that lurked in the shadows. One ominous night, she received an anonymous tip about a clandestine meeting of cult members at an undisclosed location. Fueled by an unrelenting drive to expose the truth, she made the decision to attend, to witness firsthand the dark forces we had been pursuing. That was the last time I saw her. In the days that followed, the journalist vanished without a trace. Her apartment was left in disarray, her notes scattered, and her computer wiped clean of all our research. It was as though she had never existed, erased from the world as if she had crossed a boundary that should never have been breached. I scoured every lead, followed every cryptic message left behind, but the journalist remained elusive. It was clear that she had uncovered something so deeply disturbing, so unfathomable, that those who sought to protect the cult's secrets would stop at nothing to silence her. In my search for answers, I became a fugitive, a target of those who lurked in the shadows. The darkness closed in around me, and I could feel their malevolent presence lurking just beyond the edge of my perception. And so, as I write these final words from an undisclosed location, I am left with a haunting question that may never be answered. What did the journalist discover on that ominous night, and where has she vanished to? The truth remains shrouded in darkness, a relentless enigma that continues to haunt my every waking moment. And as I continue to elude those who pursue me, I can only hope that one day, the journalist's fearless pursuit of the truth will be vindicated, and the malevolent forces that seek to silence us will be exposed to the unforgiving light of day. In the shadows of the night, if our tales from unsettling horror stories gave you a fright, press like and let it be known. Subscribe, so you're never alone in this haunting journey, and share, so others too can be wary. Until our next sinister tale, stay dark, dear listener.